I'm Marguerite Knight. I'm a member of the Government and Public Affairs Committee of the Thibodaux Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to the Candidate Public Forum sponsored by the Lafourche and Thibodaux Chambers. This is for the candidates running for Judge, Court of Appeal, First Circuit, First District, Division D, and District Judge, 17th Judicial Court, Division A. We will begin with a 2-minute opening statement preceded by a series of prepared questions where each candidate will have a 1-minute response time, concluding with a 1-minute closing statement. Responses will be timed by official timekeeper, Brian Fail, right in front of us, sitting, and then the green light goes. It will illuminate, followed by the yellow light when there are 15 seconds remaining, followed by the red light when time is up. We ask that each candidate please respect our time, and if not, we'll buzz you until you do. Okay, we will begin the evening with an introduction of our candidates seeking the seat for the Judge, Court of Appeals, First Circuit. And it's very important that you understand that these are two different races. There's the district court and we'll introduce, and then there's the Court of Appeals. We are going to continue on because, as you see, there's an empty seat up here, but we start on time and we will proceed as scheduled. So, Judge, Court of Appeal, First District, Division D. Mr. Tanner McGee was supposed to be here. He's not with us. And then we have Mr. Judge, Mr. Stephen Miller. Followed by District Judge, 17th Judicial District Court, Division A, Ms. Heather Hendrix and Ms. Rebecca Robichaux. And we are going to start off with Judge, Court of Appeals, Mr. Miller.
Thanks to the Lafourche and Thibodaux Chambers for coming together to create this opportunity to inform the voters about our election and our resumes. My name is Judge Steve Miller. I am currently judge in Division B of the 17th Judicial District, which is Lafourche Parish. I was elected by the people of Lafourche Parish first in 2014 and then without opposition in 2020. I'm from Lockport. My parents are Sid and Joyce Miller. Both taught school for many years in Lafourche Parish. I graduated in 1985 from Central Lafourche, and I went on to LSU, graduated from there, and then Tulane Law School. I worked in the plants and the shipyards to make my way through college. I've been married to my wife, Ann, for over 20 years. We have 2 children. Emma is a freshman at LSU, and Jack is a senior at Edie White. When I started my practice, I didn't have any connections in the legal community, so I started out on my own. Before long, I was picking up work from the public defender's office, and then I joined the district attorney's office, where I was a felony prosecutor for about 12 years. When I ran for judge, I had about 20 years of experience in as a lawyer. I believed I had the courtroom experience and legal experience needed to handle the very serious responsibilities of a Louisiana trial judge. I knew how important that role was, and I believed that I was qualified for the job, and so I stepped up to the plate. In December, I will complete 8 years of service. I've presided over thousands of cases, criminal and civil. I've done my best to work hard and be prepared and respect everyone who appears before me. I have made sure that I have moved my docket with respect to the litigants and, in criminal cases, the rights of victims as well. I'm now running for the First Circuit Court of Appeal. I have the judicial experience needed to handle this very serious responsibility. The Court of Appeal reviews the work of the district courts. My experience on the bench makes me the candidate best prepared for this job. I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to our district judge, Ms. Heather Hendrix.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank the Lafourche Chamber and the Thibodaux Chamber for providing us this opportunity. I'm happy to say that this past Friday I received the endorsement from the Lafourche Republican Parish Executive Committee for this race. And I believe that's because I have been a prosecutor for 8.5 years in this parish. I've been an attorney for 12 years. My first career was as a teacher. I taught 8th grade for 11 years, and I enjoyed that thoroughly. But then, at that point, at the age of 36, I decided to go to law school. I graduated from Tulane Law, where I'm proud to be an adjunct professor of trial advocacy still to this day. I have a dedication to the community through my numerous clubs and organizations that I am a part of. I have a vast experience of dedication to victims' rights. I've tried the worst of the worst. I've tried a death penalty case. Y'all all might remember the unfortunate massacre that occurred in Lockport that David Brown committed. I worked with Cam Morvant, Christine Russell, and Joe Soignet trying that case. I have over 75 criminal jury trials. I think it's important that qualifications matter because a judge needs to be able to take the bench and move right on with no learning curve necessary. And I'm the candidate that can do that. I'm a member of the NRA. I have worked with the DEA, the ATF, Homeland Security, the U.S. Marshal's Office, and the U.S. Attorney's Office in making sure that drugs that are coming from Mexican cartels crossing the border into the states and using the Highway 90 corridor to stop here in Lafourche Parish. I was involved in a multi-parish jurisdictional effort to stop that, and we were successful. I have worked with the AG's office extensively in the area of child pornography investigation. And
Thank you, Ms. Hendrix.
Oh, thank you so much.
Ms. Robichaux.
Yes, thank you very much to the chambers for allowing us to speak to you so you get to know the candidates very well. I'm born and raised here in Lafourche Parish. I've been a practicing attorney now for 40 years. Solo practice here in downtown Racine. I grew up in the St. Charles community, going to St. Charles Elementary School.
Turn it on. Oh, can you hear me?
No,
Sorry.
thank you.
I think most of you heard me. I'm loud and clear. Grew up in the St. Charles community, going to St. Charles Elementary, and my father was a shipbuilder and moved us to Lockport, where he managed his career with Halter Marine Shipyard. Thought my career would be maritime law, but unfortunately, during my college years, my parents divorced. And so that became the legacy of where my career would go, not maritime law, but domestic law. I'm a graduate of Southern University, and I have practiced here now for 40 years, married the love of my life, Jamie Robichaux, have 3 wonderful children, Jeremy Paul, who's also an attorney, Jacqueline, who just graduated in education and psychology, and I lost a son and a husband in an accident 21 years ago. I've been a very hard worker. As a widow, I know what it means to work hard, support your family, what's left of it, and to represent the people of Lafourche. Most people would tell you I'm a strong advocate for my clients, and that comes with the good and the bad, because over the years, I've represented thousands of clients in business law. I have a real estate license. My husband was a broker, so we managed to do a lot of business law before his death. I also have a sewage business license. That's an operator. For here, the people in Raceland that live behind the hospital, I have to manage their sewage. So I come with complete diversity in a lot of areas, not just one area. And in my expertise is in the family law. We all go through law school and we choose our paths, or our paths choose us. So I chose family law, and I think I've been a strong advocate.
Thank you, Ms. Robichaux. We'll move on to our prepared questions. And this will first go to the district judge candidates. And do you believe the composition of juries adequately and fairly reflects society at large? And why or why not? And if not, what can we do to change this? This goes to Ms. Robichaux first.
Yes, thank you. Juries are selected by the attorneys on the cases. We have peremptory challenges, so if you feel like a person is not fit for your case, you're allowed to strike that person from being on your jury. We can't all get the same people or the complete set of jurors that we would like on a case, but you can strive definitely by using the strike system to be able to accomplish the ones that you would like to be seated. The jurors are selected randomly, all walks of life, for a particular case, and they're paneled by certain groups that come before you. Certain ones are chosen, others are not. So I think, yes, we represent the entire parish of Lafourche because all voters are in that panel and can be pulled for a juror at any particular time.
Great, thank you. Ms. Hendrix.
I believe your question was specifically referring to the jury pools that come together. And as our clerk, Ms. Annette Fontana, she pulls the jury panel from driver's licenses and from voting records. Now, the issue becomes who is actually sitting in the room in front of you when the case starts, and you want to pick the right person for that. Now, is it reflective of society as a whole? No. There is a distinct shortage of African Americans, Hispanics, and other nationalities that come before us. I have been in numerous jury trials where the defense lawyers have wisely questioned the number of African Americans that are represented. However, if all groups vote and register to get their driver's license, then we will have adequate representation of our community.
Thank you. Court of Appeal now. Judge Miller, do you believe the composition of juries adequately and fairly reflects society at large? Why or why not? And if not, is there anything we can do to change this?
So the juries are drawn from a certain group of people, and we talk about driver's licenses and things like that. So if you don't have a driver's license, for example, you may not be involved. But I had one case where there was an attack on the pool of jurors, and we brought Ms. Fontana in, and she provided a statistical analysis of the group that was brought in. That seemed to be exact match for what we have in Lafourche Parish. So in that sense, it's good. Now, what you end up with after you pick a jury, can't say it's the same thing. For different reasons, different folks will show up. We have a lot of people who are working offshore who ask to be excused, for example. As far as minority representation, if that's part of the question, I've tried my hardest as a judge to make sure that no one is being left out on the basis of race or sex or any of those factors in an inappropriate manner.
Thank you. We're going to go on to question number 2. And what criteria would you use for deciding whether to impose or affirm sentences outside of the standard ranges? And we do start with Judge for Court of Appeal, Judge Miller.
Sentences outside of the range. So judges can deviate from the statutory guidelines, although it's quite rare. That's not the thing that is very well supported by the appeals court and jurisprudence. And the attorneys oftentimes will go below the standard. They can do that by agreement, and it's appropriate in situations where there are facts known to the parties. I would suggest deviating below might be appropriate. So how would I review that on the Court of Appeals? I'd take a skeptical look if it's outside of that range. But there are circumstances that certainly call for the highest sentences, and I've imposed them myself as a judge. And that would be the way I'd review it, with a little bit of skepticism, but with an understanding from experience of how these things are confected.
Thank you. Moving on to District Judge, Ms. Hendrix.
Yes, ma'am. I would say that it would be appropriate to deviate and go outside the bounds of the statutory guidelines if there is significant harm to children who have been abused, if there's harm to the elderly, and if you have repeat offenders. You have to look at the facts and circumstances of each individual crime. As a prosecutor, you get frustrated seeing the revolving door at the jails and that there is such repeat offenders. We call them frequent flyers. If your name is known, that's a problem. You're not getting the message. And so it is important that a judge be very aware of the sentencing guidelines as well as the mandatory minimums and extremes to know to apply the facts for that specific case. Harm to children, elderly, and the heinousness of the crime.
Thank you. Ms. Robichaux?
Yes, ma'am. The statute provides the guidelines for which a judge is to impose the sentencing and the penalty for the crime that was involved. That's there for a reason. You have a minimum and a maximum. Your question is going outside of it. The question has been asked many times, would I apply the law? The law is a range, and within that range, your question is outside the range. So I am here to tell you today that if I'm elected, I would uphold the law based upon the crime, the facts, and the circumstances of that offenders in any particular case. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on. What do you believe are the causes of today's incarceration rates, and what measures from the judicial system are needed, if any? And we'll start off with the district judge race, Ms. Robichaux.
Yes. The incarceration rates are determined by the cost of living, the everything that goes into the system. And so we look for ways to try to reduce that, to get the maximum money in the system when people are incarcerated over time. We share jails between different parishes. Those things all factor in, and I think that's a legislative factor that when the legislature looks at it, there's not much guidelines in it. I think it's more in the sheriff's department, setting the fees and the jail fees for prisoners and exchanging prisoners from one parish to the other. So at this point, I think it's something within the judicial system, but something that has a lot of discretion too.
Ms. Hendrix?
I think there's a huge problem that occurred in 2017 with the Justice Reinvestment Act. This reduced the sentence for someone. So if someone is sentenced for 10 years and it's not a crime of violence, they're only going to serve 2.5 years. If it's a crime of violence and they're sentenced to 10 years, they're only going to serve approximately 8 years, give or take. The problem becomes that the inmates could have PhDs in mathematics because they know how to do the time calculations. They know what programs and classes that they can take to get as much time off of their sentence. So a judge has to be very informed and knowledgeable about the time calculations and know to do things such as stacking sentences so that you don't have such repeat offenders and that people serve real time and not just a short stay in a jail where the prisoners know more than the legislator as far as time calculations.
And now we'll move on to Court of Appeal, Judge Miller.
So I've worried for a long time about the incarceration rates being too high because I feel that why would Louisiana have the highest incarceration rates? I don't think we're any worse than anybody else, and I don't think we should have the highest incarceration rates. But in addressing that problem, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You need to be really careful in tailoring legislation to address the issue. One thing you can do that I think is very important is support drug courts. I'm the drug court judge in Lafourche Parish. It is cost effective, it reduces recidivism rates, it's very effective and reunites families, which in my estimation is one of the reasons why the crime rate is so high. It's the deterioration of our family units. So I think programs like drug court can be very beneficial in addressing a problem that does exist.
Violent crime, particularly youth violence, is perceived to be at a crisis level by many experts today. What, if any, do you believe is the appropriate role for the judiciary in addressing this perceived crisis? And we start off with Judge Miller.
I'm real worried about that too. We've had this conversation in court lately a lot. We're seeing it in particular in New Orleans. We have it here too, where these children are committing their crimes. And there's been a strong move to treat juveniles differently, which is appropriate for the most part. I'm concerned the pendulum has swung a little bit too far. I think we need to spend a little more money in our juvenile facilities. We can't find places to put juveniles right now. All the judges, all the sheriffs, and DAs in the area, really South Louisiana, struggle mightily to find places to put these children who have committed offenses. It's a grave concern. It's something you need to talk to your legislature about. We've had cases where we're sending people out of state, and the problems that creates for moving their cases forward is something we deal with as well.
District Judge candidate, Ms. Hendrix.
Yes, ma'am. We're all aware of the violent rise in the use of juveniles to commit crimes, oftentimes by adults who know that if a child is arrested, versus that adult himself, the child faces less time in jail. For example, juvenile life is up to 21, the age of 21. If someone is 14 and transferred to adult court, that person can be imprisoned until the age of 31. And if they're 15, they can get life without, they can get life with the possibility of parole. The issue becomes, how can we service these kids? Because when I was a teacher, we called them feral children. They're out there raising themselves. So we need to have more boys and girls type clubs to help the children. And the DA's office is the one that's going to choose how to charge them as an adult or as a juvenile.
Ms. Robichaux?
Yes, thank you. Juvenile crime has grown and is growing, and we've just recently heard about the 15-year-old that shot somebody at the football game in Bogalusa. Crime is getting out of hand everywhere. It's in all our safe, small communities. We're not thinking we're going to be affected by it, and we are. I think it all stems back for troubled families, broken homes. It's not coming from good families. It's people that are having tough times, low economics, lack of education. And so the best way to curtail our juveniles is in the education department, obviously, and having programs that will distract that. We have DARE with the Sheriff's Office, which we're trying to teach them at a young age to respect the law, to respect human life, to respect each other. So until we get a handle on programs that we can reform children from broken homes, because statistics say this is where the crime's coming from. It's not from good homes like yours and ours. It's from broken homes, and we need to get that addressed.
All right. Do you believe that all citizens have adequate access to legal help and the legal system? If not, what can be done? And we'll start off with candidate for district judge, Ms. Robichaux.
That's a difficult question, because if you're a criminal and been charged with a crime, we have IDB. So I think they have fair representation across the board. My practice has been in civil law, and so many times people can't afford a private lawyer when getting a divorce, when trying to get an adoption, or when you have civil rights issues. We have self-help. Annette Fontana's office has pleadings to help the poor or to people that do not have the finances to hire their own attorneys. And that's the right step in the way, that we want to all be treated the same when you come to court, but yet we all can't get there the same. Money talks. And so we do have that open path from the clerk of court, thank you, and that hopefully those people will not be left out in left field, that they can have the same judicial and fair, impartial chance in the court like anybody else that pays for those services.
Ms. Hendrix?
Yes, ma'am. I believe that through the criminal process, IDB is an excellent resource for people who cannot afford lawyers. Now, the issue becomes, as Ms. Robichaux was saying, with the civil process. As a judge should be fair to all, the represented and the unrepresented. Every citizen should be able to come into a courtroom and represent themselves without having any kind of impaired view from that judge. The judge should not hold that against anyone. Rich or poor, you should have access to all the same legal filings, pleadings as anyone else. And as a judge, I would do that. I would be able to give everyone equal treatment under the law, whether they're a millionaire or whether they're far from it.
Judge Miller?
28 years ago when I started practicing law, if you would, 28 years ago when I started practice, if you showed up without an attorney, a lot of judges would practically run you off. They felt that you absolutely need to have an attorney. And through the years, that's changed greatly, because now there's a lot of resources that are made available. The Supreme Court has made that a mission of theirs to provide those type of services to people. So that's a good trend. As far as the criminal area, I hate to say that the access is inadequate for people, because our public defenders work super hard They're really good attorneys. They're undersold by their clients a lot, but they're really good attorneys who, with adequate resources, could do a bang-up job, which would parallel any other private attorneys, I would suggest. It's just the resources aren't there for them. So I think there's really a shortcoming there, unfortunately.
Right. To what extent have you practiced in the area of criminal law, family law, complex civil litigation? Judge Miller.
Ma'am, I hadn't practiced law in 8 years. So let's do it this way. How much have I handled that on the court? We handle everything in Lafourche Parish goes through the district courts. Like, we don't have specialty, it's not divided into civil and criminal. So we do everything. So as far as the time spent, the normal stuff, it's a tremendous amount of exposure to that type of material. And as far as the complex litigation, from right when I started, somehow I ended up at a whole lot of these legacy lawsuits and all this oil and gas litigation, which I had never done as an attorney. And that took a little work. There's always a learning curve, I think. They're always throwing new things at you. And that took me a while, but you just have to work a little harder sometimes. So I've got some exposure there as well.
Great, thank you. Ms. Hendrix?
Yes, ma'am. I have extensive criminal law experience, as I was saying in my opening. I've tried probably over 2,000 misdemeanor trials, which are judge trials, and have over 75 felony criminal jury trials. I've tried everything from no seatbelt to the death penalty. As far as complex civil law, I was very involved with the litigation against Mr. Go, which is the Mississippi River Gulf Outlet, and the lawsuits against the Corps of Engineers after Katrina. In family law, I've handled all aspects. My first divorce case that I handled out of law school was a covenant marriage, and if you're a lawyer, you know those aren't the easiest ones to do. But I have handled extensive family law as well as child custody, and I would throw successions in there as well with family law. But as far as the most experience I would have out of those three areas is criminal law.
Ms. Robichaux?
Yes, ma'am. I am not the one that has the most qualifications on criminal law, but I will let you know. Nobody leaves law school without taking criminal law and criminal code of procedure. And to get a license, you had to pass both. So I do have extensive knowledge on what in that area of law. As far as I've handled DWIs, assault and battery cases, but like any lawyer, you choose your path. My path was not criminal law. That doesn't mean I can't apply the law to criminals that come before my court. My extensive background is in family law, civil law, successions, personal injury cases. To that realm, I have extensive background on that. I think I can serve well as your judge in those areas of law. Complex litigation, there are very few of us that would say, except maybe Judge Miller, that they have handled that, because when you have a complex case, you're going to find a specialty lawyer. You're not hiring just Joe Blow off the street. So I have complex litigation in senses of custody cases fighting between one state and another. And I see my time is up.
Thank you. All right. Please describe one instance in which you faced an ethical dilemma and how you resolved it. Ms. Robichaux.
Ethical dilemmas come up daily, probably in a practice as large as mine, and you have to decide, if it's a relative. Do you take the relative, or do you pass them on to somebody else? Because everybody says, do not handle your family when you come out of law school. Or there are times where we have a list of names that I have maintained for the 40 years of my practice. There may be one or twice, a couple of times where somebody has told me the story, and then I'm like, wait a minute, I think I've heard that. And when you research a computer, there's a conflict of interest. The Supreme Court wants us to follow mandating that we follow these lists, so we know that we're not going to overstep our bounds in the ethics part of talking to someone that we have no right to. So there are times that there's a gray area. Once in St. Charles Parish, I felt I could represent the client. The other attorney just didn't like me on that side, pulled some strings and said, well, you've been associated with the family. So I withdrew.
Ms. Hendrix?
I can tell you I faced an ethical dilemma that I really struggled with when I saw in a case that I was prosecuting that evidence had been turned over to an attorney that it shouldn't have. And I struggled with whether I should bring that, one, to my boss and whether it should go further. And I looked at it and I said, you know what, I got to be able to lay my head down on the pillow at night. So I shared it with my boss, who then took the necessary action and called the AG's office, and an investigation was forthcoming because of that. It was against a person that I considered a friend of mine, and that's what's the hardest thing. That's when it's the ethical dilemma, because you're dealing with people that you care for, you respect, officers that you care for and respect, but you got to do the hard thing. You got to do what's right, and that's what I believe in: following the law, following the rules, and doing what's right.
We'll hear from our Court of Appeal candidate, Judge Miller.
I think when you're talking about ethical dilemmas, you're talking about when the rules, the canon of ethics will apply. And to be honest with you, I shouldn't say that, honey, I know. A lot of times the decisions I guess I'd like to focus on are those decisions that you make in custody cases, hard decisions, which isn't exactly on point, but if I may. When you have to make decisions as a judge between two great parents, and how do you take that child away from this wonderful parent to any level? I like to see my kids every day. Or two, frankly, bad parents who you don't really want that kid to go with either one of them. Now, is that an ethical dilemma? I don't know, but it's the type of dilemmas that judges face all the time in and out of court, and you just have to be true to the law. It'll guide you through those hard decisions a lot when you apply the law fairly.
And this is our last question, so do you believe that voluntary professional and community service is a necessary commitment to persons holding public office? What forms of voluntary professional and community service have you been involved with in the past and currently? And we'll start off with our Court of Appeals, Judge Miller.
Do I think it's required? I don't think you're doing yourself any good when you're requiring people who are adults to do community service or things of that nature. I think if you're forcing it, it's not where you want to be. I think volunteer work is where it's at. I can identify a few things I've done there. I was on the committee for Lafourche ARC for several years when I first started practicing. I've coached a little bit my kids, which explains why they're not better athletes. I was on the Civil Service Board in Thibodaux for a while, which I really appreciated that opportunity to serve. I'm in the volunteer fire department in Thibodaux, and I've been doing that for several years, and I've been vice president of my company for a period of time. My wife's much more dedicated than me, and I want to just thank her because she kind of drags me out off the couch to do some of those things a lot. So not as much as I should be doing, but some.
Ms. Hendrix.
I wholeheartedly believe in community service by being members of organizations. I know that during this campaign, I hear and see people that say things, we see all these politicians during election season, but we never see them again. And that is a huge problem. I believe that it has been, in the past, judges hole up in their houses and you never see them after they get elected. I know that I personally admire Judge Walt Lanier, who's always out there cooking the shrimp stew at the Fireman's Fair and at Lafayette. I am a member of several organizations. I'm a vice president of the Bayou Newcomers. I'm a member of the Down the Bayou Girls Red Hat Society. I am a member of the Chambers, and I've helped out with Bless Your Heart. And I think that it is incumbent upon leaders to be present in the community and not hole away in their houses.
Ms. Robichaux?
Yes. I did not join any members in this race. I wanted people to know who I am. And so I stand by my history and my husband's history. I coached my son, the attorney sitting here, baseball since he was a toddler. My daughter, Jacqueline, at age, T-ball age, coached there all the way up until high school. I have devoted my time to running the recreational department in Raceland, funding that building, running those concession stands. I've also been the chairman of La Vie Lafourche, very prominent festival we have lost due to diocese rules and regulations. And that festival brought in over 200,000 people at a fair. So try running that for 2 years. So I devoted myself and time to St. Hilary Church Parish for 40 years. I've been a Eucharistic minister, lector, commentator. That's my way I give back, where it is in your heart. I believe in those groups, religion, and dedication to my children, always put family first. And that's where I volunteered my time for. I've also been members of the past bar associations and served my different offices there too. Thank you.
And now we'll move on to closing statements, which will be a 1-minute timed. And we start off with Ms. Robichaux.
Well, I want to thank you. I hope you've learned some things about me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. I promise to be a fair, open-minded judge, actually Lady Justice. I'm going to carry that blindfold and make sure that I treat everyone fairly, that whatever grievance you have with the court or whatever claim you're bringing before the court, whether civil or criminal, that I will promise to do my best and not to look to race, not to look to wealth, not to look to poverty, but to apply the law as the law is written. I've been asked that so many times during this campaign. My number is 60 on the ballot, and I want to tell you really quickly why I am so excited with that number. The angel wings represent my husband and my son. I lost both of them 21 years ago. Both of their football numbers were 60. This was a random number, and I can't tell you how much it's helped me meet the people of Lafourche Parish and be able to retell this story over and over, because I feel like I've always lived every day with them in my heart. But just letting you know my story now, that I didn't pick that number. I believe God has a hand in it. Thank you.
Ms. Hendrix.
Thank you, ma'am, and I want to thank you for this wonderful forum. I came from a blue-collar family. I had to work for everything that I had, and I worked hard. No one's ever going to outwork me. I came from a family whose last name didn't mean anything in the community. I was the first to graduate from college in my family. Now we have 5 grandgirls. They all have postgraduate degrees. We have 2 MBAs and 2 lawyers and 1 CPA. I can tell you that I think it's very important that people look at qualifications and dedications to a community. I was born in Shreveport, haven't lived there since I graduated from high school in '88. I can tell you I had absolutely no choice in where I was born, but I did pick where I live now, which shows you I make really good decisions. Justice delayed is justice denied. Therefore, I think it's important that we move the docket and that the next judge hits the ground or the bench running. I humbly ask for your vote, and I'm honored to sit here before you today.
And Judge Miller.
Thanks again to the chambers for arranging this forum. It is important that everyone gets out to vote, and I hope I provided information that help you with your decision. Throughout our lives, we have to make decisions on hiring, whether it's our doctor or plumber or fishing guide. We want someone with experience, not just any experience, but experience that relates to the job that you're looking to fill. I've served as a state district court judge for 8 years. I was sworn in as an attorney 28 years ago. I was in court handling major felonies for 12 years before I took the bench. My experience is on point. I've been fair and impartial. I've worked hard and treated people with respect. I'm prepared to serve in the First Circuit Court of Appeal, and on November 8th, please vote for Judge Steve Miller, number 36 on your ballot. Thank you.
Yeah, they all deserve a really great big round of applause.